right, welcome everybody to the work session. We will turn it over to, City Manager or Ken Bowers, who will do the first section on tax increment reimbursements.
Yes, good morning, Mayor and Council. We have two items today that are kind of related and interrelated. The first of which is the tax increment reimbursement program. We have Ken Bowers with Planning and Development to present this item.
Thank you. Ken Bowers from Planning and Development. So what I'm going to present today is staff has prepared an amendment to the program formerly known as tax increment grants, and we have changed the name to more accurately reflect what it actually is, which is a special type of reimbursement-based partnership that would be funded out of the tax increment generated by a development project. So why are we looking at this? So Raleigh is a high-growth city, has a lot of development projects springing up all over. And with that development activity comes impacts, but also opportunities to look at partnerships. And partnerships allow the city to shape and leverage development in a way that you can't do with regulations alone. So we have legal limitations as to what we can get out of the regulatory process, but if we're willing to partner with developers, we can enhance projects beyond what the regulatory environment would allow us to do. And so the other key thing is that sometimes you don't know that there's going to be an opportunity until a specific project is proposed. So you want to, as a organization, position yourself to be able to capitalize on opportunities when they arise. And a key part of that is being able to commit funding. And so by looking at the tax increment as the source for funding, it allows the city to act quickly when opportunities present themselves. So how does it work? You start with a site that's worth, say, $6 million. Where did I get this figure from? Multifamily land in Raleigh is worth about $30,000 a buildable unit, and a typical mid-rise apartment building like you see being built all over town might have 200 units in it. So that produces a land value of $6 million, and when it's done, it's worth $60 million, actually $600 million, because $60 million is worth $60 million because those finished units are assessed by Wake County at about $300,000 a unit. And that figure actually is also drawn from reality. That's roughly what many of the new apartment buildings that have recently been completed, such as Seaboard Station, have assessments a little over $300,000 a unit. So that creates a significant tax increment. And so the land before development only paid $21,000 a year in city property taxes, and after development it'll pay $213,000 in property taxes based on current rates. So that increment, that $192,000 of extra money flowing into the city's ad valorem tax receipts, is the source potentially for financing stuff. So the reimbursement from developers would come out of this annual tax increment for some period of time. So like the tax increment grant, you're benchmarking it against these future tax payments. You're essentially reimbursing the developer a certain share of that over a certain period of time, and the specific share and the length of time would be something that would be negotiated based on the size of the reimbursement that's needed to fund the thing that your developer is building on your behalf. So a little history, the current tax increment grant policy was adopted back in May of 2021. Since that time, the policy has never been used. There have been no tax increment agreements entered into between a development entity and the city of Raleigh. The original statutory basis for that was the Economic Development Statute. In October of 2023, the City Council adopted some ordinance that allowed us to use some different statutory authority specifically for reimbursement agreements. And those either are transportation projects or they are items that are within the city's capital program. So for example, if a Greenway Trail is part of the city's capital program and a developer is building adjacent to that and builds the trail on our behalf and we reimburse them for that work, that would be done pursuant to that type of authority. Then in April, staff brought forward and this council adopted a partnership policy. And that partnership policy talked about the terms under which the city would enter into a partnership. And a reimbursement agreement is one type of partnership where a developer builds something extra alongside their development project, and we work to offset the cost by reimbursing them for a portion of that cost, either all of it or some of it. And so that policy guided how we evaluate them, what sort of due diligence the staff does, what the public process is, and what the process is for council involvement. And so here we are today talking about this new replacement for the tax increment grant policy, which is where we have given the acronym TIRP for Tax Increment Reimbursement Program. A lot of animations here. So what are the key features of the program? It is flexible because it can fund projects from small to fairly significant depending on the size of the project, the private project that is being subject to the tax increment. So a single, say, apartment building would be able to fund several $100,000 worth of improvements. Something the size of a downtown south scale project would be able to fund several $1 million worth of external improvements. The second thing is a very low risk. The city's not borrowing any money, so this is not like tax increment finance, and we'll get into that. Then the payments don't start until the benefits are constructed and in public use. And then it's responsible because by basing the reimbursement payments off of a share of future tax revenues, you're assuring that there'll be positive cash flow in terms of tax receipts in every year that the reimbursement is active. You're never reimbursing more than is flowing in new property taxes. So what kind of projects can we use this for? The first category is economic development, and this is very much a carryover from the existing tax increment grant policy. This is what it was structured around. So you've got a major mixed-use project, and you want to finance some public facilities or attractions. That could be a sports venue, it could be a performing arts venue, it could be a major open space attraction that's allied to a private development project. But in order to meet the test, it has to be something that creates a lot of jobs and supports economic sectors and grows the tax base. So because of the job creation, a purely residential project wouldn't have qualified for a tax increment grant under the old policy. Under the new policy, you can also use the same tool for financing smaller, more modest things. So I used the example early of a single multifamily building, has about a $60 million assessment. If you do some math with projecting, say, a 10-year payout based on 50% or so, you could finance maybe $700,000 worth of public improvements. What kinds of things might you do with that kind of money? You might enhance a transit stop. You might make pedestrian improvements to an intersection. If there's concern in the neighborhood about traffic calming, you can't really require off-site improvements, but you could enter into a partnership to pay for, say, traffic calming on adjacent neighborhood streets to mitigate the impacts of a development. So there's all sorts of things like that that would fall into that financeable range for a more modestly sized project that could be purely residential, where you could enter into a reimbursement agreement using this tool. So what are the project requirements? It's got to align with city plans and goals. It has to have an agreement value that can be paid for by the tax increment. And we put a sort of minimum figure on there just because there's a certain amount of administrative overhead with doing a program of this nature. So the value of the agreement to the city has to be at least $200,000. It's finances stuff that would not occur but for participation in the program. The tax revenue is sufficient to cover. And we're also requiring the developer to at least make a request of Wake County, even though I think in many cases the type of stuff that would be financed would be financed basically through city participation only. But it's important to remember that the split between this on your property tax bill, if you live in the city, over 60% goes to Wake County, less than 40% goes to the city. So with county participation, the amount that could be financed is significantly higher. And so for regional facilities or things for which there's a county interest, if the county participated, that could generate a lot more financial power for this program. So just to highlight again, risk is very low. The developer is building the thing and getting paid back, so they're essentially assuming the risk during funding and construction. Reimbursement doesn't occur until the tax increment is on the books. There's capacity limits that would prevent too much of the city's tax base ending up in this program, so 2% of annual tax levy. And then there'll be reporting in the budget of all these outstanding agreements. This is similar to what Charlotte does with their tax increment grant program. So it'll be very easy for the public to find out what agreements have been approved and what the financial implications have been for the city. But remember, again, this is paying for stuff that would otherwise not be existed, that we're using a partnership as a way to deliver those public benefits and infrastructure. So what are the major changes? The legal basis is broader under TURP than it was under TIG. The eligible projects are more numerous and can be smaller. The reimbursement schedule is instead of saying this is what it is, it's going to be subject to negotiation based on the terms of the agreement, but never more than what can be financed out of the tax increment. And then instead of having a custom process that is different from what's in the partnership policy, we're just using the same process as for any other partnership agreement under the council adopted partnership policy process. Then I want to talk a little bit, since this is being talked about in the context of other public financing tools or special assessments. For compared to tax increment finance, which is usually based off a larger district, or an MSD, which is based also again off a larger district, this is really very site specific. In terms of who does the work, most of the time in tax increment finance, or if you're using an MSD to make capital projects, is the city doing those capital projects. In this case, the developer is doing the contracting and construction management. The financing comes from the developer, unlike borrowing against future revenues or using PAYGO in an MSD. And the tax rate that is faced by the development is unchanged in both TURP and TIF. Obviously, municipal service districts is a type of special assessment district, and there is a higher tax rate for people inside the MSD. So the next steps are really to answer any questions that you may have and have a discussion today. And if the council is amenable, this would appear as a special item on a future agenda item, special agenda item. And were you to vote it out favorably, then it would be a replacement for the current tax increment grant program. So with that, I'm ready to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Do we have questions? Councilor Silver and then Councilor Patton.
Thank you, Ken, for the presentation. Can you just clarify again, go over how that future assessment is determined? Is that negotiated? I know the Wake County is the one that determines current assessment, but just explain how that is projected out over a period of time.
Right. So all this will be subject to the particular negotiation of the agreement, but the tricky part, of course, is that when you enter in the agreement, you have typically engineers' estimates of the cost, but not the actual bid, although you could try to defer it until you had the actual bid, which would give you a more accurate thing on the cost side. And then until the building is constructed, you have an estimate of what the tax revenue will be, but you don't have it. You don't know exactly what it'll be until the building is completed and the assessor comes and does their assessment. So you have to build into the agreement terms that work such that those numbers can be adjusted and the reimbursement still hits a target figure by the end. But if you read the program, and we work very closely with finance and others in the manager's office, is that we are basing it on the actual assessment, and the taxes flow into the county before the reimbursements flow out.
Okay, Councilor Patton.
Hi again. I have a few, but I might just start with, anyway, I'll just start where I start. So one of the conditions of the process is that the applicant will also petition the county for participation. Does the county have a comparable program to this?
The county has, they have a policy that was adopted, I think, back in 2007 that we related to tax increment finance specifically. But, and we have had conversations with the county about we had conversations with them when we developed the original tax increment grant policy, and we have had conversations with them as we've worked on this. But I think at this point, they don't have a specific policy that targets this exactly. So if they wish to adopt one in order to have a better framework for how staff would evaluate a request that came in from a developer. At this point, we put that into the policy so that the question would be posed, but it wasn't, if the county said no, we would still work with the applicant to see if there was a viable path forward.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder if it might be worth further collaboration with the county, because I feel like if they don't have a comparable tool, then the applicant's going to ask and they're going to say, oh, well, we don't have a way to
Right.
do that.
And I think we wanted to share this with the council at the work session before bringing it to the county. Following this meeting, if we want to build a little time in between now and when this comes back on a future agenda, we can have more in-depth conversations.
And then I was wondering if you could speak to, it seems like some of the things that could be addressed through this policy update are things we are accomplishing through some other tools. So like, for instance, in my district, we approved a development agreement, I think, to construct a greenway. So it's just a different mechanism.
We did, and in order to do that, there had to be money sitting in the CIP that we could allocate.
Oh.
And so by pledging future tax increments, you're basically making a commitment in future budgets to budget for this, but you don't have to have the money banked in a CIP account in order to enter into the agreement. Now, in case of the agreement that you're talking about, it's very similar in that it is a reimbursement, but it is not pegged at all to the tax increment. And in fact, likely when the payment goes out that year, it'll far exceed what the tax revenue that goes in. It's also a one-time payment where the payment goes out at the time that the city certifies that the work on the Greenway Trail is completed to its satisfaction. So that's the major difference, is that, think of this as a subset of reimbursement agreements, a special type where the reimbursement is paid to the future tax increment and occurs over a multi-year period as opposed to a lump sum.
Okay. And so in cases where we have some other type of agreement, like in that example, will these projects, will we be seeking to reevaluate whether we've used the right tool or whether we would switch to this one?
I think that would be for future projects on a case-by-case basis. There might be circumstances where we want to structure the agreement like we did on Lewisbrook Road. We certainly won't be revisiting that agreement because it's already executed.
Got it. Okay, I'll stop there for a second.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you so much. I want to take a look at, I understand for the developer side and the city side, I want to look at the residents portion of it. So if we're saying that future budgets are going to be reduced with this, whatever that number is for these projects, do we have an allocation in the budget of which we're going to take that money from? Or how does that work? Help me explain that portion of it. I think it's hard for residents to understand what part of the budget are they going to see affected because of these projects.
Right, so all ad valorem tax revenues flow into the general fund.
Right.
So ultimately, if you decide, like any other expenditure on a capital project that comes out of the general fund, it'll reduce the amount of money available for other things in the general fund, but it is based on the future growth of the general fund that's occurring as a result of this project. So part of the accounting is that you account for this in future capital budgets in the out years in which the expenditures are going to occur, and you cap that so it's never more than a small percentage of the city's ad valorem tax levy. But it does have an impact, like any other dollar spent has an impact. I'm not sure if I'm totally answering your question, but.
You may be, that's a lot of words. You may very well be answering it, but I want to make sure that I'm able to explain it, and I don't know that I can very well explain that.
Yeah. So, sorry. So again, the cap is set up as 2% of the total ad valorem tax revenue. If a specific question is, are we accounting for what we're not spending money on because we spent money on things that are financed this way?
Right. So if I'm explaining it to them, I just want to make sure that if I say if we're going to cap it at 2%, where is that 2% coming from that they're going to either see, is there a reduction in services? How do I explain that to them?
Right. So what you say is if we were to get close to the 2% cap, at this point we're at zero and have been at zero since the TIG policy was adopted. If we were to get close to the 2% cap, the implication would be is that you would either have to reduce spending by a commensurate amount on some other thing, but that's always decided on an annual basis as part of the budget process. So at the staff level, we can't say what those reductions are. But it's the same impact as if you spent money directly by financing a capital project.
So
difference
thank
in the
you,
impact. This is
Ken.
just
How
a-
about we have our CFO come up
Okay,
and
yes,
kind of
please.
address that,
Thank
and let Member Jones that will make it make sense for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Allison Bradshaw with the Finance Department. The way I think I would answer that specific question is think of it similar to the way PAYGO dollars get allocated, because really in theory, one of the slides talked about the fact that the city really would have plans to do this at some point in the future. And so if you think about it, as the revenues are coming in from the increase of the assessed value, which is typical, right, on an annual basis, our property tax number is increasing, and we're taking a little bit of that increase, similar to the way you think about our PAYGO process, and we're allocating it to support that initiative. So that project, that's the way I would
So I'm
frame
going to
that
say it
up.
back to you so that I make sure that I'm understanding it correctly. Because of the whatever the project is, whatever they're bringing in, we're hoping that is softening that blow into our general fund. So that is-
Absolutely.
okay.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Councilor Melton, did you have a question? I saw your hand raised, and I don't want to interrupt. if you did.
My question was sort of a part two to yours. I always understood it, the project requirements has the but-for condition. So really what we're talking about is to even qualify for this, it has to clear the threshold of this project would not occur but for the program. And so then we have this new property tax revenue that will come in, and it's like a rebate on the property tax revenue. So it's not money that's coming out of our coffers where we're looking at a cut in services. This is anticipated future revenue that would not exist but for the program encouraging the development. Is that right?
Yes. We're just legally not allowed to do a rebate.
I didn't mean that in the legal term. I just meant.
Understood.
Good catch, Allison, yes. But that's exactly what it is, Councilmember Lambert Melton. Really making investments to ensure that private investment is made in the community that otherwise would be a public responsibility at some point down the road if it were to happen at all.
Awesome. I'm so sorry. Did you have something?
Councilmember, might I add just a couple quick additional points? Pat Young with Planning and Development. First is, Ken said this, but I want to emphasize it. Council will get the opportunity to review carefully each of the terms and approve any of these. And the second thing I'll mention is that even though the private developer would be subject to public bidding requirements and other public requirements, it has been proven that very close to 100% of the time, the private sector, because of existing relationships with contractors, can do these projects faster and cheaper than we can. So it's just something to consider as you weigh out the different opportunities.
The other question that I had, and I'm not sure if Ken, this is for you or not, but when we talk about increasing, so right now we're at 0, you're saying we have no partnerships, no TIG policies, and we want to increase that to that 2%. Do we have the staff capacity to do that? Are we going to need to hire more people? This seems like a lot of tracking, and I know as we talk about other areas in planning, we say that we need to follow and track metrics over time. Do you see an increased need in staffing for doing this policy, or are we covered?
So there's two bits of overhead. One is the negotiation of the agreement itself. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what my division, Urban Projects, is already doing.
Okay.
If we started doing many more of these than we're doing, I wouldn't rule out a future budget request for an extra staff person.
Okay.
But that would, because the work we were doing is useful and the council wish to support it. On the budget and finance side, I'll defer to our CFO.
Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon again. Allison Bradshaw with Finance. Yeah, from an administrative standpoint, we can absolutely manage this from an administrative perspective, so I think we're okay.
Okay, fantastic. And then lastly, I think there were a lot of, I know you mentioned in the backup materials, there was an ordinance that you mentioned here that we enabled in 2024. There was I'm sorry, let me find my notes as to where I had that. My whole overall point, because I can't find where that note is
But the
those
partnership
documents
policy was 2024.
there it is, the partnership policy.
Right.
I don't know that I saw all those. As we go towards this, can we make sure that all those documents are there just so that I can reference it and I can see how we got here? And then,
Absolutely.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Hello, me again. Just one more from me. I wondered if housing benefits will be a considered public benefit is under this. I've seen that some others, while we often use the term inclusionary zoning, that's like unfunded. I've seen some papers from other states about funded inclusionary zoning. I believe they use a tool or approach similar to this to offset costs of that. And I wonder if that is a thought on how we might use this tool.
That's a good question. We haven't written it specifically with that purpose in mind, and I think the reason is that in order to put public money into a affordable housing project, you need an inclusionary threshold of at least 20% of the units, and we're not sure that this is enough funding to support that level of inclusion. But it's something that we could look at, and tax, in communities where formal tax abatement is legal, or if something is publicly owned and can be tax abated because it's publicly owned, that can be a very powerful tool for affordability. So it's a very good point to raise.
I have a question just about the General Assembly and local government commission. So are we the only city doing this, or what are the other cities? You may have already mentioned that. And then all of this is copacetic.
Yeah, so no special authority is needed for this because, again, we're using existing reimbursement authority that will either fall under those ordinances would be adopted, the economic development statute, or would be executed through a development agreement, which might be a common tool. The original model for this tax increment grant policy was the tax increment program in Charlotte, and Charlotte has been doing this for many years, so they have a lot of experience with it. They mostly execute them through development agreements. In fact, they may exclusively. It's been when we were researching the tax increment grant, they had all been done as development agreements. So, and I don't believe there's any involvement in local government commission because the city's not doing any borrowing.
Right. Thank you.
One more question. I saw in the backup materials that it would have to be aligned with the comprehensive plan in order for this to take effect, or in order for them to be able to ask for it. So I'm wondering if that's true, does that mean that this requirement would prevent them from applying for a rezoning, or will that be up to council? Like, will you as staff say, all right, here, you've met this, you meet with this, or is this something that you'll say it kind of meets and it doesn't hit this one, but we get to decide?
So it would not either, to my mind, it would be something that would be could be related to rezoning in the case if it were a development agreement that were being brought forth alongside a rezoning case. Now, the standards for evaluation of rezoning case, if the development agreement is part of that and there are impacts, you would have to decide, does the development agreement create an avenue for addressing the impacts adequately that I believe that approving this rezoning is both consistent with the plan and reasonable and in the public interest? I think most of the time, those types of rezoning decisions would be based on factors that were outside of the development agreement. But there could be circumstances under which a development agreement might be mitigating impacts that would otherwise be of a concern about the development, such that it tips the scales in the minds of the council members to be more inclined to vote in favor of it. But that's very hypothetical.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We will move ahead to the annexation practices and associated growth policies, and Matthew Clem.
Good afternoon. It is now, Mayor and Council. I'm Matthew Clem with Planning and Development. We're excited to speak to you today about what is a very important issue, managing the city's growth at the city's edge. So the purpose of today's meeting is to share information, respond to council interest on the current annexation practices, and provide options for adjustment for our annexation practice while we conduct some cost of growth analysis that I'll talk about in just a little bit. So today we will recap our previous council engagement on the matter, walk through our existing annexation framework, what constitutes annexation eligibility, and focus on why these decisions are important and why some require more scrutiny than others. Staff has worked with each of our service delivery departments to discuss impacts and concerns regarding annexation practice and how they'd like for us to involve them in upcoming analysis. And of course, while we're starting on some annexation work now with our cost of growth analysis, the Reflecting Raleigh process will consider new policy guidance for the council regarding growth and annexation and be part of our next comprehensive plan. So in the last year and a half, there have been several council touch points on annexation, including a presentation at your January retreat, an update in the manager's weekly report, and some council action related to public utilities policies and the adoption of the fire service master plan. So I'd like to start with our historic annexation practice. So since 1792, the city has consistently grown outward from our 1,000-acre William Christmas plan to the 150-square-mile corporate limits that we have today. So this map shows the William Christmas plan in the center of the map here. And you can see the orderly growth patterns emanating from the center and larger tracts of land through the 1920s, 50s, and 60s. This map shows the intervals of growth over the last 233 years, and it may not come as a surprise that our practices have changed in that time. A particularly impactful change was in 2011 when North Carolina towns and cities lost the power to conduct involuntary annexation. This map highlights the tracts that have been annexed after 2011, and they're shown here in yellow. And really, the key change in how the city operates and provides services and delivers infrastructure since 2011 is without the ability to perform involuntary annexation, the city is now responsible for providing infrastructure and services upfront, whereas previously, before 2011, properties would develop at the city's fringe to city standards so that when there was a baseline of tax generating properties in the edge of the city could come in, bring those properties into the corporate limits, get tax revenue from them to provide the full suite of city services. So that was a big change in how the city grew over time. So this table shows a dip in annexation area that can be correlated with the change in 2011. This table shows the years and the acreage annexed over time. And now you can see that there has been lower levels of annexation since 2011. So under the 2011 legal structure, properties are brought into the city are less likely to have tax generating uses on them and much more likely to have lower levels of service on day one. But we're still responsible for providing our full suite of services. So again, city costs are upfronted and there are more early obligations for service with a checkerboarded service area without large contiguous areas to serve. That makes costs higher for the city and service efficiency lower, and tax revenue often lower per acre as well. And this highlights a fiscal disadvantage for the city in terms of collecting taxes to provide public services. So in short, we know that we're required to upfront services now and wait for tax revenues as development increases over time. So regarding service costs, this map highlights the total assessed value per acre and shows where tax revenues come from across different parts of the city. You can see the highest tax value generating land is in and around downtown and in high activity centers like North Hills, Crabtree Mall, the Village District, and the Blue Ridge Corridor. Later, I'll talk through an example of Rivertown. And you may ask yourself, why can't I see Rivertown on this map? Yeah, that's right. The reason you can't see it on this map is because it's undeveloped now and it's generating very little tax revenue. So to sum up, annexations result in new tax revenue, and density generates higher tax revenue, which helps pay for city services. So our current annexation practice. How are your annexation decisions structured today? Well, there are several council-adopted resolutions that dictate how and where annexations can be considered. These council actions define what is eligible for annexation. We can go through each of these in more detail if you'd like, but I think it would be more helpful to show you instead. So this map shows in dark green what is currently eligible for your consideration. So properties that are shown in green, those property owners, developers have the right to petition the city council for annexation, and you, at the end of the day, have the decision whether or not to annex them. These properties qualify for annexation consideration for being inside of our extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ, and being contiguous to corporate limits. So why does this matter? Well, the more land that is annexed at the city's edge creates more land that becomes eligible for future annexation petitions. So under this structure, this will continue our trend of spreading further into the fringe. As more properties are annexed, more properties become eligible, and so the story goes out into the fringe. So there are currently 23,000 acres of land eligible to be annexed by the city. That's a big number. To put it into perspective, that's about 3 Nightdales worth of land area, or 5 Zebulons. Our current eligibility does not represent a significant expansion in service area, as most of this land that's eligible has been in our extraterritorial jurisdiction for a really long time. What that means is that our plans and service departments have been preparing and planning to serve these areas in the long term. And based on current trends, we anticipate that this eligible land represents about 20 years of voluntary annexation to accommodate demand for growth in the near term. And also, additional revenue in existing service areas can improve the ability of the city to provide high-quality services. So when you get an annexation petition and it's a small single lot that is surrounded by developed area, a subdivision somewhere, those properties are, people living or using those properties are benefiting from city services. They're using our streets and sidewalks, they're visiting our parks, but those areas and properties are not contributing to the tax base. So they're getting city service and not contributing to how we provide them. So back up to Rivertown. This map shows our planning jurisdiction in light blue and our corporate limits in dark blue. And the burgundy color is what is eligible on this map. You can see Rollsville to the north and Nightdale to the south. So Rivertown was annexed in 2006. And earlier this year, a joint rezoning and annexation request was approved on March 4th. So the parcels in red on this map show what was eligible before the annexation and rezoning was approved. This is the new annexation eligibility based on that action. So based on North Carolina law and our adopted resolutions, this annexation decision has activated the next generation of annexation creep into the fringe. So the pattern can continue. If these properties are annexed, then more properties at the fringe gain eligibility, and so the story goes there. So above all else, the city provides public services. Those services are paid for by tax revenue. Some types of development generate more tax revenue, some less. Some types of development cost more to serve and some less. So pairing high cost of services with low tax generating uses puts the city at a fiscal disadvantage to provide services in the long term. So we generally know that the cost of services per acre downtown are less per capita and per acre because of the gridded street network, the amount of below-ground infrastructure needed to serve dense development, trash collection, police and fire services, multimodal access to parks, jobs, and services all support lower per-acre service costs for the city. Those areas also produce far more tax revenue per acre compared to other areas of the city, meaning that excess tax revenue from low cost to serve areas is effectively subsidizing high cost to serve areas with lower tax generating value. So these pockets of more fiscally productive developments around the city are essential for providing quality public services everywhere in the city. Right. So now on to what's next. We're working through the Reflecting Raleigh process. We have a clear information on tax revenues coming from, and less specific information on the cost disparity of service provision across the city. We know that some areas cost more to serve than others. So through the work of Reflecting Raleigh, the next comprehensive plan, we are working to solicit consultant proposals for a cost of growth analysis. This work will include cost and revenue information for the whole city and help to inform annexation and development decisions throughout the city as well. And that work will include a capital needs assessment and analysis on all city fees. So some key takeaways for you today. There's plenty of land eligible today for annexation to accommodate near-term growth. Annexing existing eligible land does not create significant new service challenges, those infill annexation sites. And conducting a cost of growth analysis will give us more fiscal information regarding our long-term service commitments and provide council more detail on the cost of expanding the corporate limits at the fringe beyond what is currently eligible for annexation. So again, next steps, we are working to solicit consultant bids for a cost of growth study. That will be a part of our Reflecting Raleigh planning process. And when that work is done, we'll have more cost and revenue information to help you make annexation and growth decisions. What does that look like? Again, we know where the revenue is coming from. We know what the overall city budget is, our overall cost to serve. What we're working towards, it's understanding the difference of cost in different areas of the city. What locations cost more to serve relative to tax generation per acre. So this is some data that we have regarding some transportation costs. It's two-dimensional, so looking at a skewed aspect will help understand it better. But what we want to know is where in the city does it cost more to serve our full suite of services and what the disparity is across the geography of the city. And that work is coming. So we're looking for council guidance regarding annexation eligibility, and some potential options include establishing a fixed area for annexation eligibility based on the current conditions. And if we do that, staff recommends a period of 12 months so that we may conduct our cost of growth analysis and come back with more detailed information on what the fiscal impacts of those decisions are. This will allow us to, again, conduct the study and give you better information to help inform these decisions going forward. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay. Well, I'll start with Councilor Branch and then Councilor Silver and Patton.
Definitely, thank you for the information. A couple of questions. My first one is, when you come back with information, can you also include the cost impact and cost analysis of our regional partners? Because as they grow, we're providing services to them as well. That's and right. There's a cost to us. And my question is the cost recovery, what's the delta of that cost recovery? Because I think for us to have a complete picture of it on some of our services, we can't just look at Raleigh proper. We have to also look at our partnering communities that we're providing services to. Case in point, City of Raleigh truck, I just saw the other day in Garner, doing work. So I know we're providing those services. And my second question is also, can we have a cost analysis on those areas that we're providing services and they're not in Raleigh proper? They're in our ETJ, they're getting our water and they're getting our sewer, and we're giving it to them already, and they're paying an out of city fee, but what is that fee comparable to the services that we are providing? Because that will also help us, I think, in determining the future and how we go forward. Because if we're providing services and they're not really paying the cost for it, but yet around them we're saying, hey, you're on the fringes, we don't want to incorporate you, it may be better to incorporate somebody that's asking to be incorporated, who's on the fringe, to help cover some of that cost recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. So our cost of growth analysis will include all of our service delivery departments, including Raleigh Water. And so, yeah, we will have that back with our cost of growth analysis.
Counselor Silver.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Others have questions. I'm excited to see this. I know there was a section, a chapter in the previous comprehensive plan. I expect there to be a new one. And I'm also delighted to hear about the cost of analysis work that you're going to do. I just want to be clear on, let's say, Rivertown as an example. That was not even within our extraterritorial jurisdiction. It was about 2 or 3 miles from our border. And as I understand it, that was annexed in 2006, 19 years ago. We provided utilities to that track. Is that correct, if I'm saying?
I believe I can have public utilities.
Yeah, I just want to confirm because the point I'm making is that, you know, as we have this debate, particularly, I know we have the acronyms NESA and CESA, that I want to make sure as we have this conversation and public understands there were commitments with this rezoning. This is important. It was a large track. The city provided utilities to this track, and in 19 years, it has not been developed. But now that it's been established, all these annexations are now being brought to us contiguous to, well, be careful, a ghost of a track that was brought into our annexation, and that we, the taxpayers, just want to understand the cost of how we're subsidizing a ghost subdivision that has created all sorts of implications. So I just want to be clear as you come back, using that as kind of a poster child, it's important for the public to understand the implications. Well, that's something you do during the reflecting Raleigh process, or that's something that the consultant will do through their cost of growth analysis?
Yeah, and those are one and the same. The cost of growth analysis is part of the reflecting Raleigh planning process. So as part of that work, we're looking at cost of service across the city and expanding into the fringe. So getting the information on what our obligations are will help us create new growth policies for your consideration and adoption and how we continue to grow at the edge.
My last question is, there were some discussion when I came on board about the growth areas. I know you didn't cover it in your presentation. We have our extraterritorial jurisdiction, and then we have both north and southeast of these growth areas. Will that be part of the analysis so the public understands what does ETJ mean, what does these service areas mean, so they understand how growth occurs and the fact that all the surrounding jurisdictions have kind of claimed that territory if somebody eventually wants to annex in. So will that be part of the reflecting Raleigh, or that'll be part of the growth analysis so the public understands what these white space means?
That's right. Yes, it will be a part of both of those. So the Northeast Special Study Area, which you see here, the borders of that were established by the annexation agreements with our neighbors, as you stated, and what we need the cost of growth analysis to do to create the policies in the next comprehensive plan of how we grow is get a better understanding of what it would cost to develop these areas at various densities, or when that occurs as other services fill out to serve Rivertown and Rivertown upstream here, or whatever we call that, next development. Yes, all of that will be included.
Last question is kind of a yes or no. So you said we have 20 years of growth within our extraterritorial jurisdiction. So as we look to this, we don't have to move into the white space. There are 20 years or 23,000 acres of growth. That could be absorbed over 20 years if you absorb 1,000 acres a year. So I just want to be clear that the recommendation from staff, or at least for council to consider, is to communicate we have 23,000 acres, 20 years of growth. We do not have to contemplate going into the white space in the NESA and SESA.
I'm confused because part of your CESA is in the ETJ, and there's a plan. So can you help me understand what part of that, because that's NESA, that's the Northeast study area, but the Southeast study area,
Oh, it's within the ETJ now?
part of that is already in our ETJ, because I know when we did the property off of Hodge, which should have been phase 3, that part was already there. So I think that's the best map you have that shows the CESA part in the bottom. What part of that is already in our ETJ?
Good morning, Bynum Walter, Planning and Development. I first want to speak to Councilmember Silver's question about the 23,000 acres and the 20 years of growth. What we are saying is that at the current rate of annexation, of voluntary annexation of about 1,000 acres a year, it would take 20 years to get all of the ETJ into the city. I don't want anybody to have the understanding that that acreage would support the growth necessary to support population growth of 20 years. I don't know the answer to that question. That's part of why we're doing the comp plan, right? And then, Mr. Branch, your question was about this part of the corporate limits and ETJ. So you can see in blue in this area, the corporate limits. You can see in the dark green what's currently eligible, right? And the dark green is generally what's in the ETJ currently, right? Does that help with your question? And so the Southeast study actually goes down past off of this map.
Correct.
You can see this line here, this dashed blue line out here. That's our, right now, the state regulations say that anything that we annex must be within a certain distance of our corporate limit. And so that's showing you sort of outside that line, those things aren't eligible anyway per state law, even though there have been some long-held community studies with the county that have said, in the long run, Raleigh will serve way out here. But that's been the shared understanding for 30 years, and it hasn't happened yet. So.
Right. Yeah, and I just want to draw the clarity of the 23 that was mentioned, because, I mean, on our agenda today, we have some annexations, and if we approve those annexations, this map automatically changes.
Exactly.
Before
You totally got the takeaway. Thank you.
Before we go to Councilor Patton, I just want to say for the record, I did not vote for that. I got off council in 2005. I was not part of Rivertown. Okay. Yeah, just want to be clear.
I think Councilman Silver was the only one.
All right, Councilor Patton.
Sure, and I think we can all agree that was a poor decision by the policymakers at that time, and we're all bearing the current implications of that. But I have a couple questions. Can you go to one of the NESA zoomed in maps that you had on earlier?
Here?
Yeah, that one. It's a good one. So before I get to my question, I just wanted to kind of put an asterisk on Councilmember Branch's point from earlier. As you are doing cost of growth and cost of the full suite of services, I'd just ask like all departments to be, this is not directed at you, just sort of generally speaking, but all departments to be like quite realistic about it, because in some hallway conversations I've had with public safety providers, I've said, okay, but what is really going to happen on the ground if this person calls 911 today with a fire or a domestic or whatever? And the answer is like, we're going to get them services. Like ultimately at the end of the day, we don't want someone's house to burn down, and we're not really going to just like ignore their house if they're, beside the ETJ. So I just, those are just things that stick in my mind. So just if we can ask all departments to be like really realistic about what happens to these parcels that are near or mixed in, or these donut holes and all of that. So that's kind of an aside. But then related to this map, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question that's called, does City Council wish to establish a fixed area eligible for annexation for a period of time, perhaps 12 months? So am I understanding the question that you would kind of draw a little line around like around these Burgundy parcels and be like, for the next 12 months, only the stuff inside is eligible and all that white area is not eligible while we have this assessment. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so another way is any annexation action by the council does not create new eligibility from newfound adjacency, right?
Got it.
So you can annex these, but these are not eligible,
Still not eligible.
based on that action.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I would be supportive of that, like just kind of drawing a firm line and saying like, if you're inside of it, you can still proceed as normal. People deserve predictability, but we can't kind of continue the pattern of like peppering new ongoing new eligibility.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I just have two. Again, piggybacking on Councilor Branch's comment, I saw in the backup materials that we have the Raleigh-Durham annexation agreement, and that's up near me. I would love just a debriefing on that so I can better understand as those decisions are made. So however you and I can meet for that would be great, as well as the property between 540 and Strickland Road watershed policies. Those two that you noted, I would love to have a deeper understanding and conversation about. And then second question, as we look at these annexation reports, and I've mentioned it at different ones, I feel a little bit underprepared. I'm like, and I look at whether it's the fiscal impact over 10 years, and I'm like, wait, but balancing it, and what am I missing in annexation reports so that I'm not making the decisions based on something that really shouldn't be taken into consideration?
Yeah, two pieces to that. One, the cost of growth analysis will give you better information to inform future decisions.
Okay.
And two, I think, if I can look at this map, like this green area here, right? This little green dot, that is surrounded by city services, that is surrounded by our infrastructure. Folks all around are on our trash pickup schedule. Water and sewer exist in the ground. I think you could think of these areas as service committed based on our existing infrastructure and existing levels of service. Areas outside or currently ineligible for annexation or at the fringe could be considered service expansion areas. So where new services will be needed to bring those properties into the current levels of service for the rest of the city. So I would kind of evaluate them that way. Like, are these service committed areas or are these service expansion areas?
Okay, thank you so much.
Just one thing that I hope we can consider too, and look at the size, because if for some reason some big company or someone large comes in to an area that is right on the fringe, but it's taking up 600 acres, I think that's something that we might want to at least say, bring that to council for council to consider or whatever. So just something like a trigger size-wise, you know, you all are the experts, you know what is reasonable, so something just to think about.
Yeah, and just to respond to that, like there is a certain strategic scale of a decision, and I think that's kind of what you're getting to.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Clem? Right. Okay. If not, that concludes this topic and also our work session.